sábado.
Hi, good evening.
Hello.
Um,
Hello,
oh,
everyone. Good evening. Hello, Chooks. Good evening.
Hi, good evening, Michael.
Yes, this is Mario Michael. Good evening. Thank you so much for making our time to be with us today. We're so grateful. So we'll be starting at exactly 4:05. We just want to give some minutes to the network members to join the conversation. Hope you don't mind.
Sure, okay, sure, that's fine.
All right. Thank you so much.
Right.
Uh,
Hello, everyone. Good evening once again. I welcome you all to today's session, and we look forward to having a very wonderful time. And again, I would like to appreciate Chooks for making out time to be with us today from his apparently very busy schedule. We're so grateful, Chooks. I hope you all can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Okay, okay, that's great. So straight away, we would move straight to the topic of today, or what we intend to discuss today. Um, we sent out the links for the self-led study, um, for links to the self-led study materials, so that the members can have an overview of what today's topic is, and they can as well prepare ahead before this particular session, so they are able to ask the right questions. So our expectation today is to be able to identify pitfalls in analysis and how to avoid them. That's what we are looking at today, and we hope that at the end of today's session, we'll have been able to address that. Again, I would like to briefly introduce Chooks. I did that on the platform when I sent out the link. But let me briefly introduce Chooks from the profile we sent, the link to the profile we sent. Chooks was actually a staff in VGG before he left. Can you guys hear me?
Hi, Mario.
Yeah.
Hi, Mario. Hi, Chooks. Hi, everyone.
I can hear
So,
you.
hi. So I would really love Chooks to actually, do his intro himself. Chooks has a long-standing relationship with VGG, and it goes very way back. I think it's to be a very good opportunity for him to talk through his journey, and how he got to where he is, because it actually feeds a lot into his experience around analysis and market intelligence.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ify. Thank you so much for that. Okay, Chooks, you have the floor now, so you just take it off from here. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Ify. Hello, everyone again. My name is my name is Jokes, and it's first of all a pleasure to be here with you guys today. Like Ify mentioned, I started off at VGG as a business analyst. Yeah, and typical analyst work revolves around research, analysis, strategy, and the likes. And at some point, I led the team, and then managed the company's expansion into Ghana at the time, before I eventually just left VGG to pursue more entrepreneurial, the dream. Let's just put it that way. These days, I'm based in the UAE, and my company provides market intelligence, research, and market entry services to brands that are looking to access the UAE markets, the wider GCC regional markets, or access the Africa regional market. So still very much playing within that space of market intelligence, strategy, market analysis, combining it with technology, and just seeing how technology can bridge gaps in global trade, and connecting businesses with new market opportunities. So that's a brief overview about myself. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer. So I think that since that's out of the way, we can just perhaps proceed to analysis, pitfalls that typically befall individuals or analysts during analysis, and so how to avoid them. I think that this session would be mostly interactive. Maybe I'll just give at least from my experience, three of the things that I know are typical pitfalls to avoid in analysis. And then we'll all learn from everybody's experience and see how that, each person's unique experiences can throw more light on the topic, and we discuss generally, right? So I like for this to be very interactive. So I would need verbal cues, just so that I know that we're all here to proceed, if that's okay.
Hi, Chooks.
Sure, Chooks.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Chooks. Thanks for giving a bit on your background. I really wanted it to come from your lips to everyone else, because you have one of the most interesting, or the most what's the word, special targeted experience with regards when we think of market intelligence. Most of our mentors may have dabbled in one way, shape, or form, or are beneficiaries of market intelligence, but this is what you do for a living. Like your business, your practice is kind of built around this, and you built it from the ground up. So I believe this is like invaluable knowledge for everyone that is part of this process. I think for everyone that is on, it will be good for everyone to do a quick introduction of themselves, just like first name, so that maybe Chooks can, since we are not many in the chat room right now, just your first name and maybe first one or two questions, so that it can start off the interactive nature of this conversation, so that Chooks is not having a one-sided conversation with everyone. That may help keep that interactive spirit.
Thank you, Ife. So I suppose I should start again. My name is Chooks, just to get this going.
Okay, I'll go next. My name is Mario Michael. So Biodun, you have unmuted. So let's have you introduce yourself. Okay, can we have someone else, please?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Oluwaseyi Oshatuyi.
Great, thank you, Oluwaseyi. Who else is on the call?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Nkechinyere.
You're welcome, Chinyere.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tony Opara.
Tony, thank you so much for joining.
You're welcome.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Temitayo.
Temitayo, we're glad to have you. So who's left? We have Oluwash. Okay, we've had Oluwash. Rashid, are you there, Rashida? Tony, are you there? I guess Tony's
Hello?
network is
Mario,
poor at the moment. Okay, good. You're welcome. So, Abiodun. Okay, I think that's all we have here. Chooks, thank you so much. Please, guys, this session, like you said, is going to be very interactive. If you have questions while Chooks is speaking, just raise up your hand. Would have you on mute and take over. Okay, I mean, I'll be on mute and ask your questions. Make sure you kind of interact. If you have thoughts, you want to share thoughts, or you can relate to something he says, just raise up your hands. Okay, so we draw his attention to it. Thank you so much, Chooks. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. I think I have sort of enabled my video just because I think it would make for a more personalized experience, I suppose. So I hope that helps. And maybe people can come out with their shares a bit more just when they see who it is exactly they're talking to. And like Michael mentioned, as we go along, if you have experiences that you'd like to share, by all means, please. Just the point, right? Typically, when people commission analysis, right, it's because they need some objective assessment of, the landscape, the market, or the journey, right? They want to properly map that journey and make decisions from an informed perspective, from a data-driven perspective. And so, it can be very consequently terrible when that is not the case, when the analysis and the result of that analysis is misleading. I mean, it can cost firms and companies a lot of money, right? And I'm sure you all know that already, which is why we're exploring this topic. From my experience, I think that there are three main pitfalls to avoid during analysis, and these ones they are the more recurring ones, and they keep coming up again and again. The first is bias, right? We all have innate biases, and sometimes it plays out in the analysis, because again, we need to understand that the nature of data is such that you can use data to speak any language, right? You can have a preconceived notion and still use data to back that up, right? Because it's just in the manipulation of information, right? You can have data to say, which is, I suppose, why they have half full and half empty, right? Both are equally correct, but it's in the bias that each person is bringing to the analysis that determines, to a large extent, the insights that are gleaned and consequently what is translated to stakeholders, right? So how they say that two people can feel an elephant, two blind people, for instance, and come up with different descriptions as to what that elephant looks like. Maybe one person is touching, the trunk, and the other is touching the tusk, or and all of that. So that bias comes in inadvertently during research and analysis. And I suppose there is no better example for how bias, affects analysis than how Western media portrays Africa, right, or Nigeria. So if you all notice, when there's a good thing about Nigeria, maybe we have successfully reduced poverty by maybe 20%. So our poverty rate, for instance, an example is maybe 70, we have 30% unemployment rate in Nigeria. We use unemployment, right? A Western media reporting of that stat could say, oh yes, you have 30% unemployed, but poverty still ravages the land. Totally taking away from that stride, in how that perhaps unemployment rate has gone from 50% to 30%. to more sort of focusing on the broader, bigger negative aspects, right? And just sort of using it as a basis to say that this environment is bad, is poor, without actually benchmarking to say, okay, yes, it was this percent in 2 years ago, it was this percent a year ago, it is this percent this year. And hey, if you look at it in the broad scope of things compared to its neighbors, compared to the going global rate and the regional averages, it is a pretty good place to be, right? So bias is one thing, one pitfall that rears its head again and again, or rears its head again and again in analysis. And because we are all human beings with emotions, we all feel a certain way about certain things. We all have stakeholders that feel a certain way about certain things. It's one pitfall that inadvertently comes out again and again and again. The second one I'm going to talk about is context, right? Proper appreciation for context. So what I would call contextual awareness and sensitivity, right? Because if you take data out of, or information out of the context within which it ought to be interpreted, it is very possible that you can fall into a pitfall, right? So a perfect example of where context usually leads to misanalysis is when, and I'm sure we have all seen this, where startups would be quoting, trying to impress investors and all of that, and they're saying, hey, we're a population of over 200 million people. And so we have a market size of XYZ because, from 200 million, if we capture 10% of the market, that is, 20 million and all of that, right? But they fail to understand that, if you look at that 20 million Nigerians, right, there are perhaps only 10% to 27% that are on digital media, which means there are only about 30% of Nigerians who have an appreciation for digital and digital and all of that. So that significantly reduces the market size, the total from 200 million to 20 million, right, or thereabout. And then you're now looking at within that serviceable available market, what is your serviceable obtainable market, which is the percentage of that market that you can actually do business with, right? So context is another critical factor, right, that everybody who does analysis needs to be aware of, because the same data point in Nigeria, right, means totally different thing if you're looking at Saudi, or you're looking at Bahrain, or you're looking at Canada, right? Because of the difference in levels of sophistication, infrastructure, awareness, literacy, and a whole bunch of other factors that vary from environment to environment, right? So case in point, let me give an example. I was helping a tech company expand into Saudi, and we were sort of working on that project, and doing the research and the analysis, telling them, okay, this is what obtains in this market, and all of that. And we fell into the trap of the context trap, and we segmented and said, okay, based on the population in Saudi and the age of people between a certain 18 to 65, we estimate that this is the market size for this product, right? And we had a call with one of the advisors, one of our Saudi advisors, and he said, oh yeah, it's all good, but you had to understand that in Saudi, one, if women are not yet, yes, there is that regulation that is opening up and the economy and making women a part of the workforce and all of that, but it is gradual. So if you have a population between this age where women make up like half of that, then your active working population is about half of that, not the entire, say 13 million that are between the ages of 18 to 65. Because if women are half of that population, then you already know that half of your stats does not contribute to that indices, right? And you're also looking at the fact that the age, there's still a lot of family control. So it's unlike in the West where maybe from 16 you're working, from 18 maybe you're already making money trying to live your dad's house, your family house, and all of that. It's very different in that environment as well. So maybe from 25, 24, that's when you begin to think about, okay, yes, I think I should begin to move out and all of that. So context is another thing that is critically important to be aware of, right, in analysis, and it's a very common pitfall as well. The third, I think, from my experience, is technical depth, right? When you are doing analysis in an industry that you do not have domain knowledge in, right, it is easy to fall into this trap, right? And as a business analyst or as an analyst or as a market intelligence professional, you're not always going to have domain knowledge, subject matter expertise on the sectors that you do research on the sectors that you do market intelligence for. You're literally sort of going to be a generalist, sort of, playing across sectors, doing market intelligence and all of that. And, I was working on a project, for instance, helping a British manufacturer of precision tools enter into the UAE, right? And, science background, I had engineering friends. Physics was my best topic in school those days. I felt, oh, okay, I understand, all these things. It's small thing now. And, we did the analysis and all of that. But it turns out that, precision tools is a niche on its own. I mean, it's so niche that even people in engineering themselves can have it mixed up. So if you're doing an analysis for either market size or market entry strategy for somebody who is in that space without, getting the domain, and it's not like, I went in blind and proud, like, yes, I know it. I went on YouTube, did a few videos just to brush up and all of that. But it is so niche that there is new technologies out there that haven't yet achieved global scale. And these guys are literally at the forefront of, scaling out those technologies. So they are way ahead of the industry, right? So the expertise that they have, that they are looking to bring to this market, is one that hasn't gained global spread yet. And put yourself in a situation where you're doing analysis and research for those kind of folks, and you have depth. You lack the depth to, properly do that analysis and tell them, okay, this is the industry, this is where it's headed, this is the potential, and all of that. So that is another pitfall that usually would come up. And so how do you juggle and mitigate all of these pitfalls? For technical depth, I would say what has worked for me is be in bed with your client, right? Speak with them again and again and again, understand the space, which is why the average consultant, reads a lot, because you're trying to absorb many concepts, many technologies, many ideas as possible as you move from industry to industry. You have to have a basic, if it's a basic, you have to have a basic understanding for the industry that you're doing analysis for, right? You have to have a basic appreciation for the jargons in that industry, the terms that they use, the standards, of nomenclature and all of that, right? It's critically important, right? Speak with your clients because their own niche, right, could be a microcosm of the entire, segment. So you have to also sort of understand where are these guys playing, right? So that is, and then ask questions. Listen to folks. If you have to find white papers or things that have thought leadership articles that have been published, read as much as possible, right? Of course, it is not to be a master of all trade. You can't be a master of all. It is to have the requisite understanding of the domain to be able to provide accurate insights and analysis to your clients. For context, every bit of information needs to be interpreted within the context of that information. It's just like how they say, think global, act local, right? It doesn't get any clearer than that because there is context for every data, right? And that context needs to be well factored into the analysis, right? If you're talking about a product, why a product will move in this market or will not move in this market, why this market is ripe for this innovation or not ripe for this innovation, or why growth should be expected at X% over Y%, it has to be within context of the environment that product is going to be in, right? So that context is vitally important. Otherwise, which again, we all complain about, how we borrow policies and just, and things don't seem to move forward because we're not developing policies that work for us. We see that Singapore is doing something, we copy it and copy and paste. We see that, UK has done something, copy and paste, right? Things work, insights are only actionable to the extent that they are bespoke for the environment, right? And the third bias, the third pitfall, which is bias, the way to mitigate that is, I find that it's good to start with hypothesis, right? Because that way you force yourself within a framework of, testing your own biases. And it's okay. Nigerians don't like made in Nigeria products, hypothesis, right? How can we test this out, right? Nigerians don't have an appreciation for XYZ, right? For you to do business in Nigeria, you need to have a white man on your side who can follow you to meetings. Those are, biases that we have. I mean that, I've experienced doing business in Nigeria, right? But at best, they're still biases, right? Unless you can say, okay, let's test it out, right? So for bias, you might not even know that you have a bias, which is why it is best usually to have a set of hypotheses in your analysis that you're testing out, and you're just knocking them off as you go, right? So I think that those are the three main pitfalls that, from my experience, I've had in the course of performing analysis, market intelligence, reports, and all of that. I think at this point, I should take questions, hear your thoughts, see which other ones you have experienced, and then we can talk about it.
Thank you so much, Chooks. Thank you so much for sharing. I really had to take down the notes, especially when you were talking about context, because I observed that it's actually very unfruitful to want to solve a problem without gaining context, right? And I would just like you to throw light on something, because you said you also said we should be in bed with our clients, right? To get technical depth, context. We should think globally and act locally, right? So I want to know, what would you do in a situation when you're trying to get a particular information from your client based on the tax, and it seems as though they are not willing to give out that particular information. They are not giving you what you exactly need, or they feel like you don't need to have that information for that particular job. What do you do in that situation?
Thank you, Michael. And to your point, I've experienced it several times where even though you have a standing non-disclosure agreement, some clients don't want to, disclose certain information, right? A recent project, a client didn't want to disclose their financials, right? And we needed it for, the analysis we were doing for them. What we do is that, and I think, a good approach is to have your models built out, right? Have your assumptions clearly stated, right? As best as possible, let your assumptions, again, context, be the going realistic rate. So for instance, if a client is not bringing out their true costs, and you need that to do an analysis, for whatever project you're working on, you can look at the industry, right, and say, okay, what is the typical operating cost for this industry, or what is the typical profit margin for this industry, right? And have your model built out such that it is possible for your client to go and, tweak that bit of statistic and say, okay, no, our profit margin from historical is, 10%, right? So where you have assumed a 20% or a 15%, they can go to your model and put 10%, and it reflects in the entire sheet, right? So that's one thing that you can do, right? Just have clear assumptions for all of your analysis and for all of your data points, where assumed, mention assumed, have sources for everything, so that you can always back that up. Get contextual awareness to a good degree, because some industries are regulated to the extent that the regulator says what is obtainable and what is not obtainable. So someone cannot build a certain, and all of that. So layer on that contextual awareness. And then I think that in some cases as well, if you do speak to the client and say, hey, we really need this information for this reason. In some cases, they will open up and say, okay, here's this. They'll give you high level numbers, or even give you ratios, right? They don't want to give you numbers, okay. In some cases, they don't even have the data at all. Right? So it's asking them for it. There's nothing they can do, right? It's very really have it. And they rely on you to get that information. The other thing you can do is benchmarking, right? Similar players, same industry, similar products, and you have data on the other one, but you don't have data for your client, or your client is a new entrant. They're still a private company, but there's a public company in the same space doing the same thing who publishes their records, right? So it's a case of what is okay, let me give you an example. If a new telco wants to come into Nigeria, right? You already have information on MTN performance and all of that, because it's publicly available. So you can use that as a basis if they want to operate in Nigeria and say, okay, the typical ratios are this, right? If you don't have any information on any other player, right? So you can use going industry statistics, right, as a benchmark, or you can look at some other economies that are similar to your own. So the reason, for instance, why our policymakers would go to India or Singapore, right, or the UAE, right, to look at what they are doing is because on some macroeconomic level, we relate to an India story. Maybe we are closer to India as a community, as a people in terms of where we are in economic growth, in infrastructure development, than we are to US. So we'll relate more to India, right, as a country, right? So how are these guys doing it? How have they their demonetization policy? How did it work, right? If we decide to do the same thing, how will it work? And just sort of model and benchmark and see what works. So I think those three ways are good practices where either the client doesn't have the data and can't share, or they have it but they don't want to share, right? Michael?
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much. That was an amazing answer. I think Damilola wants to say something. Damilola.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sorry.
Hi,
Good
Damilola.
evening. Good evening, Chooks. Yeah, so I have a question about causation and correlation. During the self-study this week, I read on several articles the fact that two things are correlated, highly correlated, doesn't mean that you've established a causation. Now, how do you establish which is a primary factor and which is a dependent factor when you see two things that are closely linked?
Yeah, so master and slave type of relationship.
Yes.
So it's the easiest is one is a derivative of the other. One can happen only as a factor. The slave can happen only as a factor of the master, right? But it may not happen, if it doesn't mean that if the master happens, the slave will happen, right? But it can only happen if and only if the master happens, right? Which is why hypothesis testing is sort of like, how to establish that, will A happen if B doesn't happen. Case in point, someone asked me during this whole COVID era, right, when the lockdown first started, I'm looking out for, what do you think is going to happen? What are the new realities we're going to be facing, and all of that. I told the guy, I said, one, I tell IT 15. I said one.
Sorry about that. It's taken care of.
Yeah, sure. I said one, there's going to be lots of alcohol consumption, right? Because people are going to be a lot more frustrated. A lot of people are going to have their financials mixed up, blah, 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 right? And the way people deal with some of these things is, just drink, right? Make me show you, right? That kind of thing. So one, lots of alcohol consumptions. Two, there will be lots of increased, I didn't say lots, I said there'll be increased domestic violence, right? Again, because, people off of drinking, off of spending more time together in the house, that would happen too. There'll be lots of foreclosures, defaults, and that is obvious, right? Now, these are all closely related, right? But they can as well happen, right, without a lockdown, right? So they are all correlated to the whole situation and all of that, but I mean, they are not, they don't take, if with or without COVID, under certain circumstances, those will happen, right? But you won't say that they are slaves of that, right? So I think the way to differentiate, you say, just basically ask, will this happen only if and only if this happens? If there are other ways that it can, happen, then it's not a slave. Sorry, I like to use the master-slave relationship because it helps me in my analysis with especially that distinction, because it's easy, like you mentioned, to just think that. I don't know if you have read Freakonomics.
No, I haven't.
Okay, Freakonomics is one book that talks about literally what you're asking, in how that I'm not sure I can explain it verbatim, but a certain year in the US, they noticed that crime rate dropped, right, drastically, right? And they had a whole lot of, prior to that, they had all been projecting, crime rates will keep climbing, it will, do this, do that. It was a case of, really bad prophecies. But they noticed that crime rate dropped. Now, what happened, right? Now, the guy, the author of economics, goes back to say that a few years ago, the US legalized abortion, right? And so all of the kids who would have grown up in X time to, be causing this violence that was projected, there was now a legal framework for abortions to happen. Those kids were not born, right? Which led to the drastic drop in crime rate, right? Because you didn't have, there was a lesser amount of kids without, present dads, and for just frustrated teenagers moving around and doing all of that, right? But that was a book I'll recommend, because it literally talks about, seeing economics from totally unrelated stuff that eventually are related because of the way that they play on each other, and how, factors influence certain other factors.
Sorry, please, what's the name of the author?
1 second, let me bring the book. Yeah, Freakonomics, Stephen D. Levitt.
Okay.
Yeah. I hope I answered your question, Damilola.
Yes, thanks so much.
Great.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Chooks. Itel, were you trying to ask a question the other time?
Oh, I think he or she couldn't hear before, because they just mentioned I can hear now. Thank you.
Okay. Eniola, do you have any question before we proceed? Because you're muted right now. Okay,
No,
Chooks, in the absence of any questions.
Was a mistake.
All right, thank you. So, Chooks, I'm particularly interested in, because I was going through your profile and I saw how you, okay, if he wants to say something before I proceed, if you can speak, please.
Hi, Chicks. Okay, thanks for your thoughtful responses so far. It's been really helpful. I want to ask. I think it's a bit of a it's going deeper into the context of analysis. But I think you kind of touched on it when you talked about having the right context and depth. It's very, very important that from what you've said, that we realize the concept of asking questions is one of the key ways to avoid some of the pitfalls in the analysis. So I guess my question is around how do you go about asking questions? It really is a skill. There is a way to approach questioning in the course of doing market intelligence. How do you ask the questions? How do you have frameworks for questioning? So what's the best way to approach the the air quote questioning exercise as regards to market intelligence to enable analysts achieve the right level of context and depth that would help them in analyzing any form of data they have created. Thanks.
Thanks, Ife. And thank you, I suppose, for again bringing this up, because I think that it needs to be underscored, especially around, like you mentioned, context and technical depth. And also because most times you'll find few clients who actually know what they want, right? In some cases, and usually more cases than you'd like to experience, you find that clients are not really sure what it is they want. They just have a fair understanding of the solution or the problem they're trying to solve. Sometimes they don't even know the problem they're trying to solve, or the market they're trying to approach, right? So what works for me is I start off asking open-ended questions, right? Just because if I start out with close-ended, we might be going down the wrong path, because we haven't even fully established. I'm not convinced yet that the client knows what they want. So I start off by asking open-ended questions, let them talk, hear them out, their objectives, their vision, their goals, their challenges, right? Outside of, and perhaps broader than the initial scope they came with, because that gives you, from an organizational perspective, that gives you a firm contextual awareness of that organization, where they are, where they're coming from, where they are going, right? I then zero in on the matter at hand, right? So why do you want to do this? Again, first open-ended, right? So that is usually the first phase, right? Just so those open-ended questions to lay on the context and understand them as an entity, as an entity properly. The next phase is then the technical questions. Sort of like sometimes it is open-ended, so it's now a mix of both open-ended and polar questions, right? Or closed loop questions, so with options, because that then helps them narrow it down. And the last part, before the analysis even starts, is then regurgitating all of this information back to them and saying, okay, here's my understanding of your space, here's my understanding of where you are, here's my understanding of where you're trying to go. From all that you've said, here's what we're trying to do here. These are the objectives, these are the deliverables, and this is what this deliverable means, right? This is what this deliverable will contain, right? And so you start off with that harmony, right? I wanted to say, yourself with having that, understanding between you and the client, so that down the line you haven't gone. There's a pretty interesting analogy I saw once in school, that you can start 1 degree off, right, from the mark, but by the time you get there, you would have been so far out that it's not even close to the point, right? So 1 degree is too wide a margin of error to start off on, right? 1 degree deviation from the objective. So we regurgitate all of that information back to the client, and say, here is our shared understanding of what it is we're trying to achieve here, right? They come back and say, yes, you're on point, or no, you're not on point, or yes, let's tweak this, let's remove that. That process provides you with, 1, a thorough contextual awareness and understanding of your client, right? It's literally like a patient going to a medical doctor. the doctor is going to ask questions because there has to be proper diagnosis for there to be proper prognosis, right? So that first step is hugely important and provides the context for any sort of other, deciding on the data that you're going to get, deciding on the, benchmark, deciding on the yardsticks, deciding on a whole bunch of other factors that will play into your analysis, and all of that. So that's critical. So one, it provides the context, and the second thing it does is that it it helps you come up to speed, right? In terms of technical depth. So I suppose I should mention this as another reason for pitfalls. One other reason for pitfalls is that most times analysts assume they are experts at the beginning of a project. So you want to sound intelligent, you want to sound like you understand it, you want to sound like, yes, you know it, maybe because you're trying to close the deal or close the client, right? That is a wrong positioning. Every doctor doesn't come in like he's like an expert at your disease. As a matter of fact, I'm a doctor. Then he wants to know what you're going through, what your pain is, what all of that is. Approach every engagement like, you're what's this book? This dummy series, right? You're the dummy here, right? They've been in this space, they've been running a business for XYZ years, they understand it. You're literally coming in, it's probably your first or second or fourth or fifth interaction with that space, right? Even if you are an expert in the industry, you're not an expert in their business, their culture, their objectives and all of that. So the best positioning is to position as, I don't know anything. So usually I'll tell my clients, I might be asking some, questions that might sound dumb, is just to enable me understand you and understand, where you're headed, right? So that I can ask questions, right, that are probably even dumb, right? Just so I can hear it from the horse's mouth. Okay, what is this term? Right? I had a call with some guys a few days back. What is COT? What is advertising, media monitoring? What is COT? What is off-air door? What is all of that, right? Standard terms that maybe they will think I should know, especially since I'm doing stuff for them, but have to ask, right? So I think that one, that questioning is important, right? Start with open-ended questions, get to understand them from a broader perspective beyond the scope that is in front of you. Then narrow in on that scope after you have gained that broad overview, and ask a mix of open-ended. If you need to have a conference call with a number of people in the organization, because sometimes you have more than one stakeholder in one organization, right? There is a technical guy, there is the operations guy, there is the strategy guy, right? And then there's a CEO who has his own idea. There's a marketing person, right? You may want to have separate sessions with each of them just to understand the problem from each person's perspective, or understand the journey or the objective from each person's perspective, right? Then you go into the more technical type questions, and you regurgitate it back to them, right? Don't assume that you understand it. Don't assume that, even if you're an expert in the industry, you're not an expert in their business, right? And each player has their own unique way of navigating an industry, right? So you're basically, in each engagement, a learner. Yeah. If you, I hope I answered your question.
Yeah. I think
it's true. You did. Thank you for that. And I actually want to just drop in here, like something you said really just struck a nerve. Where you talk about going into a meeting with a customer, or going into a session with a customer with a clean slate, irrespective of how well versed you are in that industry, because each customer's context is very, very different. And I mean, you mentioned something around, asking around COT and, acronyms that typically are industry standard, but it's still very valid to ask those, because if you assume that, it means the same thing for to customers, that's actually inaccurate, because you have some terminologies that are normal industry standard terminologies, but you would see that the way that one company interprets it or defines it for their business is very different from what the next customer does. Like, you have those unique or nuanced situations where some companies even have lexicons for their organization, so that once you're coming in, you know exactly what each of these terminologies mean, because, or these acronyms mean, because it's very different for them. So thank you for that. Very, very helpful.
Okay, thank you so much, Chooks and Ify. Okay, we have multiple people who want to ask questions. Let's start with Omoyemi. Are you there, Omoyemi? Hello, Omoyemi. Okay. Rashid, you can go ahead. Rashid has muted you. Damilola, let's have your question.
Oh, okay. So my second question is, how do you deal with scope creep in terms of analysis? Like, you've engaged with your clients and they told you what they want, and then when you are almost done with everything you are gathering inside, they now come and say they want this also, and it affects the whole research that you've been doing before. How do you handle scope creep?
Personally, I actually like when that happens, because it can happen for two reasons. One is you're doing such a good job with your analysis and sort of like the periodic updates that you're giving them, that I realize, okay, we need to know more, we need to broaden this, right? Which is good, because it increases your the amount you are going to get, because you build that separately. The second reason it happens is there wasn't a proper definition of scope from the onset, right? In either scenario, it happens chiefly because of the analyst, right? If the analyst has done a proper context laying and regurgitating to agree on proper scope, you would have less of that, unless where in some cases the client is now being exposed to a lot more that they didn't know about before, and says, okay, let's add this and let's add that. How do you deal with it? It's important to, one, understand the impact on timelines, right? That's internally, right? By how much would this affect my delivery timeline? Two, how much effort is required for this new scope, right? Where there is considerable effort required, or medium to considerable effort required, you could tell the client, okay, we'll deal with this after we are done with this phase, and we'll treat it separately. Again, depending on your relationship with the client, right? If it's not so much and it's a new client, and you want to, you can, or it's an old client that is good to you, right? You can say, okay, oh God, this thing is not there, but let's treat it later at no cost. I'll do it for you, but let's concentrate on this. So I think that where the scope creep does not affect the insights and the intelligence that you'll be providing within the initially designed and agreed upon scope, you can treat it separately. But where it will have a significant impact on the intelligence, on the analysis, right? Then you have to bring it in. Sometimes you're the one who would identify scope creep, and you bite yourself in the leg, man, why didn't I think about this, right? Because you know that if you don't include this, then your analysis is flawed, right? So it depends. Some cases, chalk it up, do it, bear the brunt because you missed it, right? In other cases, treat it separately and invoice for it. Have an understanding that this is out of scope. I'll invoice for it, and then we'll get paid. right? Other cases you can't invoice, relationships, you still do it, right? So I think those are 3 ways, but the best is to try to avoid it from the onset by having proper appreciation for scope. Like mentioned, most times clients don't know what they want. So you have to define it to the extent that they know line by line what the work entails, what they're going to get, so that down the line, it's easier to have these scope creep conversations and say, okay, let's treat this separately, or let's bring it on. Or you can advise and say, it is vitally important that we factor this in, right? Because it's important. It's also good. What you can also do to help with these kind of situations is to have to be upfront and say, hey, we're going into this. It's possible, we'll have progressive iteration, because as we learn more, there are certain things that we might decide to add on. So just putting it out there, because the market will always tell us what it wants us, to concentrate on, right? So whilst we have defined this scope, let us bear in mind that the market is, the reason why we are studying the market is because the market is the ultimate decider of what is important and what's not important. So as the market feeds back to us, we would adjust accordingly. And you can have it in your engagements that future scope additions would attract a fee and da 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 da. So it all boils down to relationship management and just how you handhold that process. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Chooks. I have a question. How do you manage customer bias in interpreting your report when you have created a report without bias? Like it's more like a more of a generic approach right now. How do you do that? Like you've created your own bias, but then you instead discovering other stuff that your customer have a bias on. So how do you manage such?
So I mean, first of all, I think we need to establish that everybody has a bias. Different stakeholders want to see different things, and the reason why they commission research and analysis usually sometimes is to validate what they think they know, right? And so it's common, right? But typically, what would happen is that in light of superior arguments, as detailed out by your research, the clients will come to a point of epiphany and say, okay, I didn't know this, or so that could happen, right? But again, there are instances where the client will tell you, maybe because if they have borrowed money on an assumption and they are owing a lot of money, and they cannot go back and tell the investors that the money you gave us, we projected 200 million customers, but the size of the market is even just 2 million, right? So it's not just patch up, right? So they have a strong case for using data to support a flawed assumption, right? So in which case, there's almost nothing you can do. You've done your work, right? You submitted the document. How they decide to use it is theirs, because now they are property. But what helps, I find that what helps is that beyond stating the insights and the analysis, it helps to also have on the side of that just comments that put everything in context, right? So if we're saying that the Nigerian population has grown by 2% in the last 5 years, but in the last 7 years, or in the last 10 years, it grew by 7%, right? So you see that the growth rate for the prior 5 years is higher than the growth rate for the the latter 5 years, right? That in itself is is data, right? If you layer on some insights as to and some reasons as to why there is this disparity based on your own analysis and maybe all of the information that you have gleaned, and say, okay, the population growth rate shrunk between X and YZ because maybe it was there was civil war, for instance. Maybe it was the Biafra era. So people were not looking at, it was just all survival. Or there was this thing that happened. There was a pandemic that happened during this era. And so people were at home a lot. And so that context addition from all of the other analysis we've done helps the client properly appreciate the information in front of them to the extent that it becomes difficult for them to misinterpret it. Versus if we just put, growth rate in the last 10 years, they see that, for the first 5 years, it was 7%. For the next 5 years, it was now 2% without any, context to explain why that happened, or without layering in other information, which is why to the question that this guy that Damilola asked earlier around scope creep, because in analysis you would find that you have to now do another set of analysis to understand, okay, why did this happen? Not just that it happened and that this is the hard fact, but why, right? And then looking at a whole bunch of other economic variables and factors to say, okay, this is why it may have happened, this is why it happened, and finding information. So I think that from my experience, that is how I would typically handle that. So not just stating the hard facts and pages of the sheet or document, but having those comments that provide context to the data and sort of explain any anomalies, so it's clear. But ultimately, once you hand over that report to your client, how they decide to tweak it, how they decide to use it, how they decide to manipulate it is theirs, because now it's their property. And again, in most cases, they have existing biases and reasons for which they need that information. They might not even look at everything. It might just be one line, right, in that entire document that they are going to pick and say, yes, this is why we have been doing this. And again, which goes back to taking information out of context and just running with it. But at that point, what you owe them is making sure that your analysis is complete, is thorough, and is deep, right? If they choose to misappropriate it, which in some cases happens, well, you wish them good luck.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chooks. So I would like us to move a bit away from the customer specific scenarios to the more generic scenarios. So I would like to know, how do you address a less customer specific scenario to a more generic analysis that is of general data for intelligence that may not be targeted at the particular customer? Are there helpful frameworks for doing such generic analysis?
I'm not sure I understand you. So when you say analysis that are not targeted towards a customer, what do you mean?
For instance, you want to do a generic analysis of a particular sector, not for a customer. Like you said, customers may have their own different approaches or bias, but you just want to do something generic. And let's say you want to make a publication. You want to do something generic that cuts across the whole sector and should also cut across the various approaches of various players in the sectors. So are there frameworks to go about such generic analysis?
Okay. Yeah, so typically I think I look at three things when doing those kinds of generic market facing analysis. One is historical. So where is the market coming from, right? The second is present state. Where is the market currently, right? what are the enablers, what are the drivers, what are the happenings in the space. Then where's the market going, right? Without the first two, I find that one of the mistakes that people make in thought leadership articles and reports and all of that is that they tend to want to project the future without a proper understanding of the past and the present, right? So just because there is IoT, fifth industrial revolution, and a whole number of things, people start to talk about, just take that out of context and begin to predict how the aviation industry would perform, right? That usually is flawed because like how we say that you can't really know a person until you know where they're coming from, right? It's literally the same for research and analysis. You can't understand an industry unless you understand where it's coming from, right? Not just from a market dynamics perspective, but also from a policy perspective, right? Where is it coming from, right? From a technology perspective, where is it coming from? From a consumer perspective, where is it coming from? These guys, Kodak, I believe we all know Kodak, the famous photography company, right? Except that now they are not just a photography company anymore. They are into drugs, right? So 2 weeks ago, Kodak ventured into drugs manufacturing, right? Got a loan from the US government and all of that. So Kodak's case is instructive on many levels, and we're not even going to try to digress it, or yeah, we're not even going to try to look at it fully. But if you look at an industry and you only have appreciation for their past, and based on their past, you now do some sort of, make some sort of decisions or write any sort of thing, you would inadvertently make the same mistake Kodak made in their heydays of trying to switch to digital cameras, right? Because they didn't think that from their own experience, people were going to, not need printing films and all of that for photography, or that people won't stop going to kiosks to print their photographs and all of that. If you look at only the future, right, you make the mistake that Microsoft made with their glass. I think it was Microsoft that, or Google Glass. Yeah, it was Google, right? Because, they only looked at the future. Okay, yeah, this is based on these technologies. If you look at only the present, you would make the mistake that Nigeria makes, because we're solving problems every day, with new and new policies that have no long-lasting effect, and do not allow us learn from our past, instead of what has worked in the past and all of that. And so going into those kinds of research, thought leadership, report writing, it's best to have that balanced viewpoint, right? The past, the present, and then you can look at the future based on what you see from the past and the present. What we're going through, I don't know, someone mentioned that it had been predicted a while back. I don't know that that's true, but again, if you look at the world, it's like we're going around and around and around in cycles, right? There was the bubonic plague, the plagues that have happened that were like this, right? And just keeps happening. We're not sure that maybe in 100 years, something like this will happen again. And say, oh yeah, in 2020, it was just the same way we are talking about the bubonic plague that happened, a while back. in 2020 and correlating with what we're going through now, same could happen 100 years from now, right? So it's best to have that balanced viewpoint for any sort of research. When you're dealing with customers, is then their past, their present, and the future within the context of them, the landscape that they're playing in, and the market that they're operating in, and the key technologies that are driving it, right? But you've got to look at all of the variables, right? Policy is a variable. If you look at industry, things that disrupt industries, they usually start from three areas. One is either new discoveries in science and technology that makes the industry that disrupts an industry, or two is policy, right? New policies, or for instance, right now a lot of countries are choosing to have a firmer grip on their supply chains because they discovered that relying on China for everything is not helping them, right? They would have maybe had the COVID situation under control better if they had proper supply chain controls on critical manufacturing infrastructure. So if you're deciding now as a business in US to outsource your manufacturing to China, something is wrong with you. The third is supply chain innovation, right? So Uber did that, right? Supply chain, how you get carbs, and business model innovation, rather, how you get carbs and all of that, right? So you look at those three, especially if you're analyzing an industry, you look at policies, you look at science, tech advancements, you look at business model innovation over the last couple of years, what is happening to that industry, how, and these would sort of give you pointers around how that industry would move over time. But you can't do that outside of a studied grasp of where that industry is coming from, who the players are, what they're doing, where regulation is coming from, where the country is coming from, and all of that. Michael?
Yeah, thank you, Chooks, for that. Thank you so much. It's been a very, very, very amazing session so far. Really, really thank you. I'm thankful to you for this wonderful opportunity. No doubt we'll have you join us again for more sessions, because there's just so much to learn from you. So we're so, so happy to have you. So guys, you have questions for Chooks? Let's take your questions. If you have questions, just unmute. You can unmute your mic and ask your questions. If you have thoughts, please do share. Thank you.
Even if they're not questions, maybe you had another, or you experienced a pitfall in your analysis, that you want us to talk about, or you have an experience you'd like to share. Please, I'm a learner. I'm always learning, right? I don't know everything.
Yes, awesome. If you definitely, I believe you can relate to some of the things Chooks has shared. So you can just share with us some of the pitfalls you may have experienced in the past, and how you were able to overcome, them, and just share. Okay. Since we don't have anyone sharing now, so Chooks, there's something I want to have you share, which is a bit, not so much digressing, but just a bit away from analysis now, because I was going through your profile, and the transits, the change in roles and all, they struck me, how you move from project management to business analysis, and you're still able to strike a balance. So I would like to know what informed that decision to switch over from project management, business analysis, doing market intelligence stuff. Would you like to share?
Okay. I would say that one, I get bored easily, That's a personal attribute of mine. I don't know if it's good or bad, but you know, I'm the one who would stop tap start tapping my feet in a meeting if somebody is speaking too slowly or is moving too slowly or all of that. So um, that's me. I'm a very curious person. I like to satisfy my curiosity. Even if it's and typically that comes with maybe learning new stuff. So I've started more courses on Coursera and edX because I just wanted to understand something, and then once I get it, I just drop the course. Right? My curiosity is satisfied, right, and I move on to something else. Um, so that's me generally. Um, with regard to roles, I think that you learn and you switch based on what it is that you're looking for. I have always positioned as a solution provider, right? So I help people solve problems. And that means to a large extent being a generalist versus being a specialist, right? Because I need to have conversations across a broad spectrum of um, domains, right? So I can speak agriculture, tech, real estate, manufacturing, and all of that. And it comes with, just sort of having the requisite skill sets, let me put it that way, to be able to hold those conversations. And that will sort of drive the skills that you acquire. And when you're playing in that, opportunities will come that it's no more about, you're a research person versus you're an asset, right? To any team you are a part of, right? So you can speak. I have managed PR and communications, right? Because I had an ad tech startup, right? And I had an ad tech startup without operating in advertising. So for me, it's just basically spotting opportunities, spotting problems, and trying to solve them. Whatever path trying to solve them takes me, I'm happy to explore that path, right? In some cases, learning a new skill and all of that. The only skill that I think I have again and again and again said, oh, I'm going to learn this, but haven't gotten around to learning is programming because, sometimes we're dealing with programmers, they want to, act as if they are after God and Jesus and the Holy Spirit is them, right? Uh, but you also have to look at, time value, your time and, what it was more important. And then you decide to prioritize. So I suppose that's it for me. It's just basically for me about solving problems. So where a problem presents itself and is interesting enough for me to solve it, and I'm excited about it, I would learn anything to be able to solve that problem. In some cases, that means I have a certification. In some cases, it just means I start a course on edX and not finish it. In some cases, it means I watch lots of YouTube videos. In some cases, it means I call people up and spend 4 hours on the phone talking to me about something and all of that. So I think that would explain my roles, and also because I did biological sciences in Ife, right? So I studied biochemistry in Ife, but I wasn't a biochemist from my first, what's that thing called, COS, whatever. I knew I was not going to do BCH. I wasn't going to end up in a lab and all of that. Just too boring. So from school, I was doing a whole bunch of other stuff. And then when I finished, my first job was in VGG as a business analyst. And those people on this call who have experienced VGG know that, business analysis is a term, but your job is more than business analysis, right? So you're doing coordination, project coordination, you're doing research, you're doing product development and management, you're doing a whole bunch to the extent that you can decide that, okay, I like this, I want to focus. And I had colleagues who went from business analysis to become financial analysts, because as a business analyst, you have to do financial modeling to a good extent. There were lawyers in the analyst team. So right now I can draft documents, legal documents, review legal documents, draft contracts and all of that. There were systems analysts, so, using Jira, prototyping tools, MySQL and all of that. So just picking here and there and making sure that you're improving yourself, basically.
Wow, wow. Thank you so much. It's more of becoming what is necessary to get the problem solved. So if you have to assume the role of a project manager to get the problem solved, you do that. If you have to assume the role of a financial analyst, I mean, in a situation where it's not like a financial analysis is so much needed to solve the problem, you just assume the role or acquire the necessary skill needed to solve the problem, and you get that done. Wow. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Chooks. Again, guys, any question for Chooks? Okay.
Sorry, I should mention a caveat. It doesn't then mean that, when you have a client that needs financial analysis, you wear the cap of financial analyst, so you should still get those experts that can do it. But what it does is that it enables you be the bridge, right? Just like a business analyst in a tech environment is the bridge between the tech team and the customer, right? A consultant is the bridge between his clients and whatever other resource he is getting, whether it's financial, legal, or tech or business. So you have to be able to speak multiple languages, translating customer requirements to the different language that either the lawyers understand or the financial guys understand or the technology guys understand. So if you want to be at that point where you're the bridge between people's problems and the solutions, then you have to sort of be willing to embrace a whole bunch of, relevant skill sets and just know a bit about a lot, and maybe just master one or two, but know a lot about a lot.
Okay, yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Chooks. Let me give you guys another chance to ask questions if they have any questions, guys. Any questions for Chooks?
Hello, I have a question.
Okay, please go ahead.
So I heard Chooks talk about people who do analysis and focus on the past and the present. Then he mentioned Google Glass, about them focusing too much on the future. So I was wondering, how do you actually do analysis to actually see into the future? Like, building products that's so futuristic, or because you anticipate what's going to be in the future? Because I understand that to do the present and the past, you just have to read the data that are already available. But for the future, I'm just thinking there is no data available. So what are you actually using to see that?
Okay, thanks. What was the name?
Kunle.
Thanks, Kunle. So there's something I have posted. I think it was in my previous apartment, but something I have and that I say often, that the future is here, right? It's not just evenly distributed, right? So the problems that Nigeria is solving today, people have solved it and moved and forgotten that they had those problems, right? The problem that the US is solving today, some people have solved it and moved past that problem, right? So the first place to see the future is literally just benchmarking, right? What is happening in ABC, XYZ, who has done what we're trying to do, right? Or what we think is the future of whatever. For instance, case in point, future of education in Nigeria, right? If you do a paper on future of education in Nigeria, it is going to be completely different from if you do a future of education in Finland, because Finland has one of the most advanced education systems in the world. If you even revamp their curriculum to be more, dynamic and all of that, right? So if you're doing a future of education in Nigeria, you're probably looking at maybe countries like, India, China, what are the new technologies that are gaining ground there and helping them solve their mass illiteracy problems, right? So that's one. Two is that you have to look at the fabric of the society you're living in, right? To be able to say, okay, this would work, this would not work, right? And technologically speaking, yes, that product is possible because, it's all. But where you're still battling with, a whole bunch of other security issues, privacy invasion, and all of that, the government is clamping down on you. And now you're giving people the tool to go around just basically anybody they want to video without them being aware. So I can literally walk down the street, take pictures of folks, take videos of them without them being aware, right? I would say that that is not a technology the US government that all of us know would want out there, right? Even though it's possible, at least not until they are listening to our call, so it's fine. Not until they have had the chance to use it themselves, and use covertly for whatever intelligence gathering and all of that. So I dare say that that product exists. It's probably in use, but it's not mainstream consumer product because of the ramifications. I mean, look at how, Google, Facebook, TikTok, and the whole bunch of them are going through privacy issues just from an app that you download on your phone and use, right? So looking at the projecting for the future is not just about technological capabilities, it's also about nuances, right? What's happening in this environment? Will this happen? Will that happen? Will who are the big wigs that would want this? Who are the stakeholders? Whose right does it infringe? If you want to, it makes sense, right, to automate toll gates in Nigeria. Whose right does it infringe? For instance, you want to go against Jagaban, right? And the big wigs, right? So the future is always a factor of not just the present, but the context within which that future is going to materialize. So that's important to understand. So it's benchmarking and then context, right? You can always look at technological capabilities. There are ongoing conversations. Goldman Sachs, for instance, in an analysis they did, I think last week, was talking about the effect that a COVID vaccine would have on global tech stocks. Because if you notice during this crisis, tech stocks have risen, right? From Zoom that we're using for this call to Facebook. Zuckerberg is now a centibillionaire, which means he's added about $22 billion to his net worth just in this crisis, right? Jeff Bezos, his story. So what will a COVID vaccine do to all those company tech stocks, right? Of course, I'm not propounding a conspiracy theory that, they will, because of what might happen, they're not going to release a vaccine, but it allows you have a balanced understanding of the forces at play when you're talking about, vaccine or no vaccine, right? When you're talking about, treatment, no treatment, we're talking about opening up and not opening up and all of that, right? So that context and that balanced awareness of all of the factors, all of the stakeholders, is critical for any sort of predictive analysis that you do. I hope I answered your question, Kunle.
Oh, yes, you did very well. Although I don't know what you meant by maybe they are listening to us right now.
Well, Um, yeah, let's leave it at that then.
All right then. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Chooks. I think I have a bit of understanding of what Chooks meant, but like you said, let's leave it like at that. All right. Thank you so much, Chooks. It's been an amazing session. A final question, anybody for Chooks before we call it a day? Final question, anybody?
Can I ask one more question then?
Sure,
Sure,
Kunle.
please go ahead.
Okay, so I assume that there are a bunch of resources that Chooks always listens to or watches on YouTube or follows on online just to keep himself sharp and to keep abreast of what is really happening. So I'm just curious to know what are those things he does. I know for one, he does a lot of courses on Coursera and the likes, which he does not finish, although he finishes some. So I'm just interested in what people he follows, the things he looks at to keep himself sharp.
Okay. Thanks, Kunle. So one of the things that I do is I follow influencers. And my own influencers are not the celebrity kind of influencers. So sort of like industry subject matter experts, right? Who are those driving conversations in ABC? I'm not a strong social media person. So the only social media that I typically use is LinkedIn, right? And I'm trying to post more often now because it's good for when you're running a business. But when I get on LinkedIn, right, one of the things I look out for is what are people saying, right? Because on LinkedIn you can manage your feed so that even though you are connected to 1,000 people, it is not 1,000 people's posts that you're seeing. You see the posts of only people you want to see, right? So you can clean up your feed such that you're seeing what those influencers are saying. And when they are talking about something, they release a report or something, you read. WTO, UNCTAD published a report today, for instance, on trade, right? Trade statistics for last year, right? I've gone through the report, just sort of came through, not reading in depth, but just sort of looking at it and understanding what the dynamics are. Maybe because I play in that space, right? I'm helping people enter new markets and all of that. So I need to understand what's happening in the space and all of that. So influencers, reports that come up, just to keep yourself abreast. And I think one other thing is to actually, because if you're consuming without regurgitating, right, it just gets lost somewhere, right? So it helps for me, for instance, I'm always busy, so I have some way to utilize the information that I'm hearing, but you can do your own analysis, right? Post something about a space or an industry, right? Nigeria, for instance, just signed the new Company and Allied Matters Act into law, right? What are the implications for registering a new business in Nigeria? What are the implications for inward flow of foreign direct investment? What are the implications for startups, SMEs, right? And the likes. So when you put yourself in a position where you're asking questions of events and happenings, not just taking them in, but you're actively questioning, okay, this has happened, what's the implication, right? This has happened, what's the implication? It forces you to look for more sources of information and to digest and just sort of keep doing analysis, whether it's in your head or you're reading a lot more. So to summarize, 1, follow influencers. 3, read reports, sign up for them. One thing that my staff sends every week is a summary of news, top news across the Middle East and Africa. Right? So I'm sort of constantly kept abreast of what's happening in the region. The third thing is just keep questioning, right? Have that curious outlook to the information that you receive, right? Somebody is now wealthy, is now joined a centibillionaires list. Why? Somebody else has dropped off from that list, and why? Nigeria is doing this. What are the implications, right? African Continental Free Trade Agreement. What are the implications? Africa 2063. What are the implications? Economic Recovery and Growth Plan ends this year for Nigeria. What are the implications? The UAE is closing off, their plan is to close off about 50% of government service centers and go digital in those locations. What are the implications? So it's just asking questions and trying to map out answers and just finding relevant information you need to boost your understanding and appreciation for what's happening around.
So can I ask one quick question?
All right, thank you very much.
Sure, Dami.
Oh, okay. Which software tool do you use the most for your data processing data sets?
I love Excel, to be honest, right? Because I can create models there and just sort of use. I had learned R at some point. I don't know if you know R. It's for data processing. Yeah. I also know how to use Microsoft's Power BI, right? Yeah, so between those three, but I always just use my Excel, right? Maybe because that was the two ways as analyst in VGG, and you've gotten comfortable with it and understand it to a fairly good extent. So just that works for me, right? For some people, it's Python, right? Again, it depends on the volume of data that you want to analyze. In most cases, for most tasks, except where it's data pooling and large data analysis, big data, Excel will do the work for you. If it's for visualization, then Power BI and all of that, SQL as well, if you want to go there.
Okay. The reason why I asked is because of the learning all the languages sometimes is especially for people who are not techies. For some of us, it's not the easiest to get into. So.
Yeah, I agree. And every time I have conversations with my tech guys, I'm like, I don't know tech. I just tell them I don't know tech, right? So why are we using this? Why are we not using this? And I'll sweat on Excel first before I go to Power BI or any of those other tools, because I just think that, and maybe also because of where I am, where I think that it's not something Excel can do, I just get somebody that I know that is great at the other tools and say, process this is what I'm looking for, and then I might just get the clean version.
Okay, thank you so much.
Sure, Tammy.
All right, so thank you so much, Chooks, again for this session. Thank you so much for making our time to be with us this evening. We really do appreciate it. So guys, I would like you to unmute your mic and say thank you to Chooks for making our time to be with us this evening.
Thank
First,
you so much.
Just thank you. Just mention if the session was helpful, maybe what you picked out, just so that I know that this was helpful.
Okay, before I do that, let me let the guys go first. So please, I would like you to unmute and tell us what you have picked out from this session and whether or not it was helpful. Thank you.
Well, it has certainly been very helpful to me, for instance. Like now, I understand the importance of, benchmarking and reading around, and of course, context. That one does not just analyze things without knowing how it impacts on certain things, especially when you mentioned the case of Jagaban and all that. So I think that has really been very helpful. And I also like the fact that you reinforced the importance of the versatility of Microsoft Excel, because I like Excel a lot. and I can also use Power BI. So it is good to know that someone like Chuk still uses Excel.
Okay, great. Thanks, Kunle.
Okay, thanks. This has been really insightful. My name is Tony. I work in the fintech space as a product designer, and prior to that, I worked majorly like in a design ecosystem. So moving to the fintech space was really difficult at first because I had to understand the technical jargons of the analysts there. However, now that I understand complexity, understanding how to get context, it really resonated with me because that's something I needed to get vast in before being able to create products, digital products that would solve the problems there.
Awesome, Tony. Well done.
Tamiola, would you like to share?
Oh, okay. Yeah, thanks so much. I appreciated how you took time to pass everything. Like the information that you gave out was like, okay, easy, just carry it and go and use straight up. And then the clarity on some of the questions I had before, it just made the practicality to the things you said was so insightful for me. So there are things that I know I can easily just pick and run with. So I really appreciate that a lot.
Okay, great. Thanks, Dami. You have a baby, awesome.
Okay, so please, can I share what I've learned?
Yes, please.
Sure, please.
Okay, so I want to say thank you for the session. I actually learned a lot. Some of us are newbies, and then we're just here to learn and learn and learn. And I've really learned a lot today, especially the area of context, trying to understand your clients and making sure that you understand properly to be able to avoid pitfalls in analysis. So I just want to say thank you. Thank you so much.
Great, thanks, Rashida. Regards to the baby.
Thank you. Cheer,
All right,
please
thank
go ahead.
Okay, like Rashida said, thank you, Chooks, for the section. It was really helpful. And Daddy asked a lot of questions because, like she also said, we are newbie and we've not started doing the analysis on Excel and the rest of it, although we could still relate a little bit with our head and all of that. So thank you. I learned a lot especially about understanding the industry where we are, the fact that we don't know all, and we should keep asking questions in order to be able to understand even those questions that's seemingly dumb. So that's just what I got from this section. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thanks, Kechi.
Thank you. I like the way she put it because some of us are very, very, would I say shy or afraid to ask questions we think are dumb. But from your session, we'll be able to learn that that's actually one of the things. I think it's better we put it out there to the client that, okay, I may be asking some dumb questions that may make us feel comfortable. Because some of those dumb questions are things that would end up being very important to the research we're about embarking on. So if we don't ask them, we may end up doing the wrong thing. So that's another thing I got. So I'm going to call some names. We haven't heard some people speak. Temitayo, share now. Don't you want to speak with us? Please share what you have learned from this session. Thank you. Okay, any other person? Please just unmute and share. Let's take one or two more.
Okay. I really want to thank Chooks for taking his time to lecture us. You know, like some of us have said that we are so newbies here and we're just getting to know the industry. So and actually what I got from everything he has said or from analysis generally is every information should be interpreted in the context of that information. So thank you so much, Chooks. I really appreciate taking your time and all the wealth of information you've shared. Thank you.
Thank you, Betsy.
Okay, can I go?
Sure, Temitayo.
Sure, thank you.
Okay, so thank you for the knowledge shared. I mean, it's interesting to know that as much as you're working on jack of all trades, just since you're doing at end given time. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Temitayo.
Okay, so that'll be all for today. Again, thank you so much, Chicks. I'll definitely be in touch so that we can always bring you in to help us flash out some very core topics in market intelligence. I want to leverage on your wealth of experience. And we are so glad and grateful to you that you have decided to be there for us. Thank you so much again. So that'll be all for today. Any final words, Chicks? And if you'd like to say something, thank you.
So thank you, Michael. Thank you, Ify. It's been a delight, and it's a privilege, and I look forward to being a part of the process again sometime.
Great. Thank you so much. Ify, any final words?
I think for me, just to say thank you, Chooks. I know as an entrepreneur, making out time for stuff like this is not always easy. It's really a situation where you literally have to do an opportunity cost, give up something to make out time for something like this. So I truly appreciate it, and I look forward to you coming in as a mentor for this community as we keep growing and building it out. At this stage, we are still at the very early stages of learning, but as we grow this as we go deeper into this learning process, into this structure, the members of the network will start working on actual active research, and we hope that over time you'd be willing to lend us your time to advise here and there as people run into certain challenges as when they are learning through this process. So thank you so much for making our time. Thanks for always being there.
Sure, Ify. Anything for you.
Thanks. Oh, as a note, oh well, Chooks was my boss in VGG, FYI, and I think after Chooks, I think there was another head of the analyst team before I became head. So he's like my senior guy in several ways. But thank you so much, Chooks.
Sure, Ify.
All right.
All right.
Yes, have a lovely day.
Thank you so much. All right. Thank you so much, guys. Enjoy the rest of the day. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.